All right, go ahead.
All right. Well, it is excellent to be here. We have been excited about kind of our Center for Health Communications involvement in the Pop-Up Institute the whole time. The flood ongoing of Basecamp emails with all the news and information, like it's been really exciting watching kind of how much is going on with this Pop-Up Institute the whole year. So my name is Mike Mackert. I'm the director of our UT Center for Health Communication. And for those of you who don't already know, our center is a joint academic unit between the College of Communication and Dell Medical School. And so I actually have faculty appointments on both sides of campus and spend 3 days a week in communication and 2 days a week in Dell Med trying to facilitate all of these cross-campus connections. And so when I was asked to come talk about kind of health comm and what it meant for this Pop-Up Institute, I wanted to kind of show two very light sort of case studies of the kinds of things that we're working on, that if one of the goals of the pop-up, I think, is to help get people excited in figuring out what we do next, it shows the kind of work we can do and how we could work with others on campus kind of on these issues. And so if I'm going to talk about what health communication is, I always have to use my standard definition to provide common ground here. And so we think of health comm is both the science and the art of using communication to advance the health and well-being of people and populations. And the really important key that I always say to medical health audiences is the science piece, because I know from spending lots of time talking to people in medicine and public health and those kinds of fields, they often think of communication as a soft skill. Either you're good at it or you're not, and it just kind of is who you are. And on the Moody communication side of our college and center, we are dedicated to the idea that you can study communication, there are best ways to do things, and we can train everyone to be better at communicating. And so there's a best way to break bad news. We can teach you how to do that. It's not a thing you just figure out along the way. And so the other thing I have to kind of throw out there is sort of a change in my personal approach. When I got to UT, I landed in the School of Advertising with absolutely no idea about anything related to advertising. I got the job because our college was building expertise in health comm, and I looked at drug advertising, and drug ads, there's all kinds of things that could be better about them, but always the biggest complaint is uses emotional appeals to get people to go demand a particular drug of their doctor or nurse practitioner, whoever the person is, regardless of whether it's the right drug for them or not. That's a really legitimate complaint, but if you, in a different context, sort of use that idea of emotional appeals to drive health behavior change, like the Truth Campaign, no one yells at the Truth Campaign for using an emotional appeal and sort of coming in from the side, right? The Truth Campaign isn't don't smoke, young people. It is, don't let big tobacco get one over on you. And no one yells about that being inappropriate, because it's a public health context, it's health promotion, and it seems really rational and good to use messaging in that way. And so my own personal work and the work of our center is often how do we take those kinds of tools and approaches of advertising and apply it to kind of public health work.
What is this one on the right?
So it's a installation they had outdoors somewhere, and it's showing how tobacco executives are two-faced. And so they did these on all kinds of different, there's a lot of these. If you Google, I've spent a lot of time looking for Google images on the Truth Campaign and these kinds of things, and there's a whole series where they would, on the side of a building, lay out this thing, and in every case it was the way tobacco would say one thing publicly, and then 10 years later the documents pop out of what they internally knew or what they were saying internally while they were busy saying publicly.
And they did those on corners like that.
Yeah.
That's great.
It's really cool, and that's the thing that I think and I'll show you a couple examples that we've done too, where when you bring a real pure advertising approach, it doesn't end up looking like most public health stuff does, which I think is important for kind of cutting through the clutter on all this. If you can get your client to say yes, it's a different problem. So thinking about the context of this pop-up and aiming at youth, the first example I wanted to talk about really quickly is our center was asked to build a brand and message for tobacco control for all 14 UT system institutions. And at the time when we were asked to do it, all 14, so everything from MD Anderson and the medical schools and campuses to UT Austin, UTRGV, UTAP, everything. They all were doing stuff around cessation, prevention, policy, but they were all kind of doing their own thing. And it wasn't always obvious. They were kind of really working hard to coordinate and spread best practices. They asked us to come in after the fact, after a year of them collaborating, to give them a message that could work for all 14 campuses. And so we knew internally what we wanted to achieve was a really flexible message and idea that would work for prevention and cessation. We didn't want to go about health necessarily, Because some people are going to quit smoking because they don't want to waste time finding a spot on campus to hide from the smoking police on their various campuses who are going to yell at you if they catch you smoking on campus. Like we have a really great colleague here. Her job, part of it is to like run around campus at the hot spots where we know people smoke and like yell at people for doing so. And like that's a waste, like, and no one wants to be that person being yelled at either. And so maybe it's a social thing, or maybe it's like the money saved. We also were really dedicated to the idea. UT El Paso has a green dot that they have on campus as part of a campaign around bystander intervention. And like the entire campus, if you see a green dot at that campus, like everyone knows it's their bystander intervention work. And so we really wanted this like very clear like visual identity we could get to, and in text, it became tobacco free with this check mark. Like we wanted the check mark to be like a stamp you could put on a building or a person or a material like this building's tobacco free, our campus is tobacco free. And tobacco free was meant to indicate freedom, like, because I don't know if you guys know, but Texans are sort of like libertarian and freedom loving in nature. And we wanted to offer it as like, my freedom to be smoke free is greater than your freedom to smoke, and kind of lean into that libertarian spirit. And so this was kind of our goal. And then what it ended up looking like was we first built sort of this visual identity with a broken cigarette, because we started messing around with like the circle, like the traditional anti-smoking thing is like a cigarette with the circle with a line through it. And the circle with the line through it, we tried all kinds of different iterations and just didn't like any of them. Like it just wasn't working. And then our graphic designer was like, oh, we could take that cigarette, break it, and that becomes the stamp we can start putting on things. And the people from the campuses told us we had to do an e-cig version because no one knows e-cigarettes are part of tobacco-free policies on these campuses. And actually the first version of this, we rolled it out in a preliminary way at their conference last spring. Everyone else, we here at UT Austin failed to notice that our original vape pen looked a lot like the UT Austin Tower. And everyone's like, it looks like you broke the UT Austin Tower and made that your logo. And it was like, oh, we probably should have not done that. So we tweaked it and made it work a little bit better. And then we kind of started showing like, this is what it looks like on an MD Anderson logo and at UT Arlington and so on. And so now we're heading into we're in year 2 of the partnership and building toward year 3, and the campuses now are starting to roll these things out. We created like a whole list of do's and don'ts. Like if you're gonna do communication in this area, like I'm not the expert, but I have colleagues who know, like you frame messages this way around tobacco control. You never put a person smoking in anything because smoking looks cool. And so you can't put, like that's why we use buildings and not people. Because if you put a person smoking in an ad, even if it's anti-smoking, like it still looks neat. One of the old, that old campaign of your brain on drugs with like the thing, like that had a big boomerang effect and actually encouraged drug use because it like was like, oh my gosh, like if this is a thing they're trying to work that hard against, like it must be awesome. And so there's like a whole thread of communication research around boomerang effects where if you tell people not to do something, it can actually encourage usage. And so the tobacco stuff pulls a little bit from that, where it's why you don't show people smoking because it tends to look kind of cool. So the other thing, and this is more relevant to substance misuse, and is what we're working on right now. The Texas Prescription Monitoring Program is part of the state's response to the opioid epidemic. And so if you've never heard of this, it's the tool a prescriber can use to look up a patient's history before they make a prescription. So if you're one of my existing patients and you come in, I could look you up and find out that you've had 3 oxy prescriptions from 2 different doctors in the last 3 months if I looked you up in the system. But use of the system in Texas is currently optional. In most states, it's required. So in Texas, it's like, we hope you use it. And the data, like right now, approximately 1/3 of prescribers use it, according to the state. And that is honestly a pretty optimistic estimate. Like it's really not 1/3. And so in Texas, they wanted us to, like the state came to us and said, can you build a promotional campaign that will get prescribers to want to use this? And so we sat down to do a bunch of research to understand why are they not currently using it, and then how do you promote usage? And so I'll show you kind of a first draft of materials we came up with that were really built on insights we learned from talking to prescribers. So one thing you hear a lot if you talk to prescribers why they're not currently using it is it's a separate system next to the EMR. It's not integrated in the electronic health record in Texas right now. So it's like an extra thing you have to do. And the doctors were like, nope, like not doing one more thing, I'm too busy, I don't have time. Now with the system you can delegate access to an RN, to a medical assistant, like other people on your team can look this up. And so we built this message around like, as the doctor, you don't have to clone yourself to use this, you can delegate access. So, which was like a really important point kind of to let prescribers know that was a way they could use it if they wanted to. We also suspect we know actually, that some doctors don't use it because they'd rather not know. Like, if I find out that someone has like a prescription history that's not, like, it's like, oh, this is a concern, I need to talk to you. Like, that is an incredibly awkward, hard conversation to have, especially if you know the patient well. And it's easier just to sort of not know and hope/assume the pharmacist is gonna catch it when they dispense the prescription. And so we actually, given that, we wanted to encourage them to adopt a policy of it's every patient, every time. So it's not like I checked you this time because I was suspicious of something. It's like I do this for all my patients every single time. And we built an entire toolkit around communication with like, here's how you explain why you're doing it. If you find a prescription history now that seems a little concerning, here are the words you can use. Here's the language you can use to do this to give people the confidence that they can have the conversation successfully to reduce that barrier of like communication. The other like practical problem we had, which I think is relevant for all kinds of healthcare providers, is doctors, RNs, like all these folks are the most over-marketed to people on the planet. It is really hard to cut through the clutter. They throw away everything that gets sent to them by the state, by their professional organizations, like it's just too much. And so the agency we're working with had this idea of sending direct mail that would say you're a drug dealer. And then when you open it up, it would talk about like a thoughtful, thorough, empathetic, process-oriented drug dealer who always checks the PMP. In pre-test, every prescriber we talked to was like, I'd open it, or my spouse would open it, or my office manager's gonna open it. Like that would have cut through that clutter.
Because of what it said.
Just because of what it said. They're like, what is this thing? But the state was like, there is no way on earth we are gonna send out direct mail to every prescriber in Texas that says you're a drug dealer. Like the state of Texas just was like, this was a no-go for them. Which, like, I know, I was like, oh man, like, we know it would work, but I understand why they don't want to send this out. Like, because when they think about the messaging they project to the state, it is like healthcare providers as heroes. Like, that's what they want to communicate is like, you're doing heroic work, you're doing great things in the world, and so then to send direct mail where it's like you're a drug dealer, like, doesn't really work super well. So we revised all of our materials because we also learned a lot that no one even knew what this was. Like, they don't know what the next PMP is for lots of prescribers. Like, they don't even know what the term is or what this thing is. And they don't know that in next September, it's just gonna be mandated. So our campaign really shifted from all these fun, persuasive things to a pretty straightforward educational campaign. So these are not final, but much, much closer to the final versions of what we're gonna be aiming to roll out statewide to let prescribers know what's happening. Our first version actually didn't talk about opioids at all. We talked about controlled substances. And from the comm perspective, we loved it because we know from data that like benzos are what's coming next. So like right now everyone talks in Texas about the opioid crisis, like benzos are coming on like the exact same like path, just a year behind or whatever. And so we love the idea of a campaign around like check the PMP for the right prescribing decision for controlled substances, because then the same thing would work for benzos a year from now. And the doctors were like, nope, you gotta say opioids or I don't care. Like that was the feedback we were getting, was like the tide of the opioid crisis was gonna get them to pay attention in a way that just saying controlled substances wasn't. So like this is why we pre-test things, because we would have really missed the mark if we didn't pre-test this. And so now we're going through, about to start the next round of pre-testing, because like in the body copy we talk about, you know, like referring to doctors or prescribers in general. We don't know, really, if we should be using pronouns, like, we are in this together, like, this is a problem, like, we can solve, it's a problem you can solve as a doctor, and so or not even any pronouns at all. And so we have language experts on our team who are gonna help us pre-test different little tweaks that can really change the way people respond to those messages. So we're gonna do a whole round of pre-testing this summer to figure out, like, what would we use language to kind of motivate behavior change in a substantial way. So the last thing I'll say, and then we can like sit down and actually talk, which seems way more fun than this. I worked with the Youth Recovery Network with my health comm class this semester. And I picked it in part because of the work this pop-up is doing, and I thought my students would really enjoy doing some work for Youth Recovery Network. And one of the reasons I'm excited about like this kind of pop-up and the attention it can bring is like I probably wouldn't have, like that wouldn't have been on my radar to pick as a client for the class. It was a Friday and my students had 5 days to learn what the Youth Recovery Network was and develop a communication plan for them. So they didn't even know what this was, and then I handed it to them on a Wednesday. I had like a very challenging Friday for a variety of reasons on this campus. And I went home and was like, God, today was not my favorite day here. And I got an email like 9 o'clock at night from one of the students in my class. And he's like, I just had to tell you what happened to us today working on this project. And they were doing research and they were starting to think that aiming at the parents of youth in recovery was like the target audience they wanted to reach out to for a variety of reasons. So the student joined a Facebook group for parents whose kids are in recovery. And they instantaneously get an email from the moderator to be like, who are you? Because you are clearly not the parent of a child in recovery. And they were like, oh, we're in this class at UT, like this is what we're working on. And the person's like, and like they're Facebook messaging each other. And she was like, can I talk to you on the phone? And they had this like hour-long conversation with someone where they were like learning, like she just told them everything. Like how frustrating it is for like the care system and feeling like you're having simple cures dangled in front of you. And as a parent, you get really desperate and you'll buy anything, you'll put your kid in anything, you'll spend way too much money on things that aren't really gonna work probably if you did your homework more seriously. They felt very, very cheated by the system. And like they were like, holy cow, like they were like, this woman's amazing.
I'm part of these groups, I know exactly what you mean.
I mean, it was really like, if the goal of like a class like that is like students experiencing like a new issue, digging and understanding kind of like the human experience of it, like they got that. And so Friday night, my Friday was saved by this like late night email from these students where like, they said, they're like, we don't even know what we're gonna do with this yet. But talking to her was like a life-altering event, I think. And then like 3 days later, they had a really cool idea based on it. But like that is why I was excited for like this pop-up existing and for all the energy that can come around that, because I know there's like these student teams who have like a new thing in the world that they're gonna be interested in. One of my other undergrads said that she came in the class she's a PR major, she had planned on working in a PR firm someday, and she took the class and was like, maybe I wanna go work in a communication firm that does health stuff. It's like, that's like the best story ever. So that's kind of why I'm excited to kind of do the work we do and kind of put together like the communication and sort of the medical health side of things, because it leads to lots of stories like that. So that was, we were told to go for 10 or 15 minutes and I totally did that. I would love to sit down and talk with you all about whatever you want about kind of communication and substance misuse and youth and all these kinds of things. So thank you, I would love to talk to you soon.